Hello, my name is He Who Is in the Water, and I want to talk about a planetary qualifier that I played in this past weekend. It was over at Millenium Games in Rochester, which is an incredible store. Absolutely love going there. And this was the first ever sealed planetary qualifier and specifically for Legends of the Force. So I did some prep for this event, and I want to talk about what my process was for that, not in any fancy kind of way, but just like this was how I tried to prepare for the event. Because by talking about it, I guess at least verbalizing it and looking for feedback, that can, aid me in getting better, which is ultimately my goal with most of these or especially like Star Wars Unlimited. Definitely my goal is just to improve. I am not really under any impression that I'm going to be the best in the room or whatever. I'm just trying to do better every time. And so talking about this process that I did will be a little bit helpful. And then going to go through the event, talk about how it did, and go from there. So for this event, I did want to purchase some sealed product to do some testing for. So I had half a box from winning or from coming second. I won half of a box from coming in second and a win a box that Ben and I split. Who was featured in the last video, and I also purchased another booster box. So I had 6 sealed pools to work with, and something that I found for Star Wars Unlimited is that playing games against myself is actually pretty productive. It's something that for Magic I really don't find to be productive in the same way. It's I think you can look at both hands of somebody playing Star Wars and it's easier to pull yourself back to an objective answer of what would I do in this situation. And in Limited, I think it's also particularly helpful to do that because the scope of cards that you're playing around is quite literally controlled. You do have cards that are better than other cards, and you have more of an understanding of what are the common things that you're going to be playing against, but it's reasonable to say, okay, my opponent's going to deploy a leader here on this next turn. I need to have damage ready on that leader, so that Protect the Pod is going to be a less harmful removal spell to myself. And so coming up with those kinds of justification and play patterns, especially for Limited, I think is really productive to play games versus yourself. Regular games of Premier, it does get a bit muddy. I think it's still very helpful to do that, but obviously, if you're the one playing both sides, you don't get exposed to new information, and the metagame in Star Wars is moving forward pretty rapidly, so, you're never gonna, get ahead of the metagame, but it is extremely helpful for testing out a matchup and understanding that matchup better. So, where this is a really, Galactics, as far as testing for that, is really expected to see a lot of Han Blue, and I think playing games with yourself versus that is a really good way to iron out a matchup like that where that 20% of the room at least is going to be on that. Again, found this helpful for thinking about sealed. So I had essentially 6 sealed pools, and I built 7 decks because one of them was actually able to support 2, and that in and of itself was a useful exercise. So I tried to go in order. I built one pool, I built the second pool, I played them against each other. I built the third pool, I played it against the first and second decks. I built the fourth pool, I played it against the ones before. So that there was at least some progression that okay, I am building my knowledge of what I think this format is about as I go along. So in theory, the last deck that I built has better underpinnings to the strategy than the first deck that I built. And so I ended up with 7 decks there. And I have the deck list, or not deck list, I have photos of the decks here, and I want to talk a little bit about each of those, and that's going to kind of cover my sealed prep here. So let's get into it. Can we click through the slide? Yes, we can. So this first deck I built is it kind of just an insane Mother Talzin deck. This just had a lot of bombs going for it. 2 Talzins, Assassins, Anakin Skywalker, the Son, Eighth Brother, a Torrent attack, reasonable early plays. This deck was just delightful. Like this was just a standout. These 3-drops are insane. Like Double Watto, Outer Rim Mystic is great. Knight of Ren is just a great beat stick. Nameless Terror was a card I was kind of low on during pre-release, but the way the game's played out, like it's actually just kind of an insane effect for blue villainy to have. So Nameless Terror is great. So this I felt like I kind of have no notes on. Kadu is a weak card. Hive Defense Wing is filler. Sith Legionnaire is not really what you want to be playing on turn 1, but it does get the job done. But other than that, like this is just a pretty great deck. Relic Scavenger also filler. Eye of Scion is not actually that great for a rare, but it's just fine. I don't think it's great, but it's not that bad. So I played 6 rounds with this. So if you want to take a second, so I played these games kind of round robin. So each of these decks played against 6 other decks. I don't have I didn't do any like tournament ranking. It was just pure round robin. I built a deck. I played it against every other deck. And so the final record, I thought this could be a fun thing to go through the video and guess. So this played 6 rounds. How many wins do you think it had? Brief moment to pause, and I shall click through. I don't know how to best articulate that part of like, I don't want to be Dora the Explorer, just like waiting for the pause. But this deck went 4-2. Which was like, yeah, like Talzin's one of the best leaders. I think the best. I think Kanan does give her a run for her money, but like Talzin, best common leader, not even close. Not even close for the best common leader. She's really good. And not to say that the other leaders are bad, but like Talzin is just far and away the best thing going on in this format, which does also have some like implications as to like units that you can and cannot play, and has implications that I did not foresee either. But this is just like incredibly solid, up the curve. This is just a great deck, and so 4-2 felt like an excellent showing for this deck. And as a result of this being round robin, there's no like 6-0 player, right? It's all just like a little bit. The records are all going to be more stratified to the center. So 4-2, very good for this deck. The next deck that I built, this pool actually got to support 2 decks. So the first one that it supported here was an Ahsoka yellow deck. And Ahsoka, I think, is my favorite heroism leader in this set because she doesn't actually ask a whole lot of you. Cal Kestis asks for a lot of like aggressive support. Kit Fisto has requirements for a ton of Jedi and is also just really bad. I'm not playing Kit Fisto ever, I don't think. Just the leader flip not mattering in almost any circumstance is just embarrassing. I can't bring myself to play Kit Fisto unless it's like the God pool, but even then I'm going to be skeptical. And I think Obi-Wan is also pretty good, but Obi-Wan, you're at the mercy of your pool. If you don't have 2-drops with Force, Obi-Wan is unplayable. And even when you do, if your opponent's like interacting with you, which in a Talzin dominated metagame is like the Talzin deck's going to be beating you up. And then if you don't have units in play when Obi-Wan's coming out, he's understated. He's not going to be able to buff. So I'm like, Ahsoka is just like the best in not a vacuum, but like without a whole lot going else right for you. She's just going to show up and be completely fine. And the Sentinel ability is like occasionally useful. But like when it's good, it's like, I wouldn't say game winning, but like it can be game winning. And that's more than some of the other leader abilities do. She's a really not high risk, high reward, but like there is a high ceiling with Ahsoka, but she's not asking a lot for you. Synergy wise, like I think she's a great sealed leader that way. Like in draft, I would be like placing Obi-Wan higher, but for sealed, I do think Ahsoka's a bit better. And so I was trying out with like the yellow heroism stuff here, and also there were like some interesting rares to play around with. I had Ogdo Bogdo and Grogu in this, so I was thinking like, okay, Ogdo Bogdo is a great thing to give Sentinel to, and if I'm giving things Sentinel, then like Grogu can start to heal them. And push back on that. In practice, I found Grogu didn't really work out that well, but I did think that Ogdo Bogdo was pretty legit in this shell. And that's good because like Ogdo Bogdo is not really like a card that you're going to play really anywhere else. But I think with specifically Ahsoka, he was pretty okay. And this deck was just fine. The 2-drops are a little light. It's asking for a bit of synergy. Like, you kind of got to do something to get Ogdo Bogdo off and running. But at the same time, like, we're playing a lot of just medium okay cards here. The ones that are most offensive to me here are the Jedi Vector, Mind Trick, and 3 Lessons. Those are just almost always resourced. And the Jedi Trials, that is a card that I did not go into this with the impression like, oh, this card is good, but it's a card that I wanted to play. And yeah, it's not very good. There's just not a ton to do with it. And if your force units are attacking, you're like doing pretty good, but like it also requires the initiative to get your force units to attack, and so you're not gonna be like playing an upgrade and then doing it. It just kind of doesn't really work out that well. But this was like, I felt like one of the least synergistic, just like good rate up the curve, but just yeah, light on those 2-drops. Yeah, and so this one ended up being a 3-3 deck, which I felt pretty good about. Like, I felt good that this was like a low synergy shell that I think I could actually replicate in a sealed pool, and have like a playable deck come out of it, which was nice. So yeah, up next was the other half of that sealed pool, which is a Snoke Red. I actually got a showcase Snoke in that one, which is funny too. And this one was definitely a bit more of a stretch on like the playables, because like there are some like okay 2-drops here, like Strike Ship and Acolyte of the Beyond are good, but Exegol Patroller and Kawaki and Monkey Lizard, you don't get to play these cards because Talzin exists. Like, I'm not sure the Monkey Lizard would get there anyway, but you can't put Exegol Patroller in your deck and play it on turn 1 because Talzin exists. It's just like, if you have Snoke, there's a little bit more of a reason, but now your like lines are super rigid, and that's not really a good place to be. This deck did have some cool other things going for it, like Inquisitor's Lightsaber is good, Sorcerer's Blast is a nice one, Purge Trooper is an all-star. Actually, I enjoyed playing this pool out because I got to see that Darth Maul's lightsaber was actually sick as heck. And you just put that on dang near anything, and you're going to town. Like, you go turn 1 Minok, turn 2 Darth Maul's lightsaber. Like, that's pretty difficult to deal with. So I enjoyed that part of this deck. I also got to learn about the weakness of some of the upper curve here. Hunting Nexu is obviously just 4 toughness is not really what you want out of it. It could be a little weak. But it was cool to learn that Blockade Runner is actually not a very exciting card. It just comes down a little late, and this format is full of 6-cost 6/6s in space, and Blockade Runner just lines up poorly versus all of them. So like, if you're really aggressive, it can kind of like push an advantage, but it's like not hard for your opponent to just drop a long beam cruiser, and this does very little. So Trident Assault Ship in the same vein, Hyperspace Wayfarer in the similar vein. Like, it's just, at Grappling Guardian also eats it up. Like, at the top end of space is actually pretty powerful. The early space units are adequate, and the top end is pretty good. The middle, there's not really a whole lot, but Blockade Runner is just like 1 or 2 resources too expensive to exploit that weakness in the middle. So that was a good one to learn. It was quite weak. Ravenous Rothtar is a really interesting card in this format to me because 8 power is like kind of insane, but also 5 health for your 6-drop is just embarrassing. I really liked in the car ride over, we had a full car going to the PQ, which was great, and we got to talk about Ravenous Rothtar a little bit. And my friend Jeff had a great description for it, where he said it has Sentinel essentially. So you're playing an 8/5 with Sentinel because your opponent's going to interact with that. And that helps me at least to like think about how to place that card. And so it's okay. It is going to like close the door hard on some games, but definitely going to be weaker in others. And another interesting card here was Thralls of the Coven. 3/7 with Raid 3. It does hit hard. Like, it is a 6/7 on attack, which is pretty powerful. But it did highlight to me through some of these games, it highlighted the strength of another common blue removal spell, which is Whirlwind of Power. And let me tell you, this card gets worked over by a Whirlwind of Power because then it has 0 attack on defense. And so that was, to me at least, an indication that, like, yeah, it is, it's a powerful common, but like the blue removal is just really good. And it's also an indication that like Whirlwind of Power is working this card over. Guess what? There's Mother Talzin's ability. A Talzin's Assassin is going to do the same thing to this. So it's a powerful card, but I think in a world where like Mother Talzin is the dominant metagame, like he's going to struggle to keep up. And I will say I was aware, like very aware that Talzin was the best thing going into this event. I don't think I actually appreciated how Sealed functions in this, and particularly when you get to like decent records later into the event, that like the percentage of people that are playing Talzin is actually quite significant. And I felt like I was really respecting it, and I think I actually didn't respect it enough. And because kind of my feeling through some of these games was that this interaction with like Whirlwind of Power on Thralls of the Coven meant that like the player that was on board already, even when you try to deploy a big meaty 5-drop like that, if they've got board presence already, cards like Whirlwind of Power and Mother Talzin, like, and Talzin's Assassin, let the player who's ahead maintain their early board advantage by just eating up your units. And yeah, they're taking some damage back, but like their attack for like 2 or whatever after killing your unit is like insane tempo because you're just struggling to like get on the board at all. And what that means, so I was like kind of processing that information and saying like, okay, I need my decks to be really aggressive, come out strong, come out up front. And so I kind of incorrectly came to the right answer of like, oh, these lightsaber upgrades are really good because they let me like develop my board early and help stay ahead. When it's kind of like the lightsabers are good because they help that your Talzins crash into your opposing Talzins with greater, or you're winning those breakpoints. And so I was like higher on the lightsabers, but kind of for the wrong reasons. And also, so I'm like lower on Thralls of the Coven here because I'm like, oh, it's like easier for my opponents to do, like Shatterpoint. It's worse. These are cards that like these decks can access. Like if they're ahead already, they're going to stay ahead. Something I kind of failed to grasp out of this part though was that like these Talzin decks are so good at interacting, the games actually do end up going longer. And so I was kind of preparing myself for like to come out of the gates fast, and it kind of works out that the Talzin decks are able to answer most of that. So like the game actually goes quite a bit longer, and there's sort of your window to try to come over things. But I was having these experiences in my test games, leading me to a understanding that was not entirely correct, but really interesting to like learn it this way. So to circle back to this Snoke deck here, it's just fine, and as a result, this one also went 3-3 and feels good. Like I think Snoke is a fine leader, but I don't think he's not as good as Talzin. So if you're looking at like a villainy deck, it's just not going to be as good. And the cards that he's good with are like not the Talzin cards. So he's a little bit funky. Like I think blue Snoke is like not actually that great. I think yellow is actually sort of where he ends up shining. And the red Snoke shells have just kind of underperformed for me and seem to underperform for my opponents as well. So I don't think this is like great, but Snoke is just like a super fine leader. If you're not getting Talzin, you're very happy to be running a Snoke. So moving on, that was deck 2, part 2. So this is the third fresh pool, but the fourth deck that I built, and this is a monstrosity. This pool was just all over the place. Could not really get anything there, so I was like, all right, what I do have is I've got these Gifted Urchins and Mysterious Hermit. And Gifted Urchin is just like such an underrated card in this format. It's like Gifted Urchin, Curious Flock, and It's Worse are just cards that you're going to play in every deck, almost every deck, and you just really want them. Gifted Urchin doesn't go great with Snoke, but virtually, or Snoke and Third Sister, but like almost all of the other leaders use the Force, and the Gifted Urchin is the best way to use the Force. So like Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and Talzin like are all getting the best value out of Gifted Urchin. Cal Kestis a little bit there too, but like it's a resilient Force unit, so you can play it, and that's great with Obi-Wan here because you're just going to start dumping things out relatively quickly. As you can see though, like the rest of this curve just kind of falls apart. Like I've got an insane pile of 5-drops. I had to cut some like good 5-drops here, but after that it just kind of falls apart. And so I was trying like these Itinerant Warriors at 6. I'm not gonna lie to you, this was just a dumb mistake for me to put Talzin's Assassin in here. I thought that costed 6 for this deck. It cost 8 in this shell, so that one shouldn't have been there. I probably cheated in my testing games with that, but don't worry about it. This deck was just weird anyway. But the lack of 2-drops was a real problem here. Like Jedi Vector, it's kind of not even worth playing. I probably should have cut that card. I did not like it. It was quite bad for me. Tip the Scale, tried it a couple times. Tip the Scale was definitely like an exploration in this pool, and it was not good. But we still had some like good stuff going on here. Double Protect the Pod is awesome. Torrenta Tech. Shin Hati is actually fine on the splash. Stinger Mantis is incredible, and Blue Squadron Assault Wing is kind of like what I've talked about. Like you just have this like random space unit that sometimes just closes the game, like Trident Assault Ship or Long Beam Cruiser. And I was trying Leia Organa just to like test how the card functioned, and it did not function well. So don't play Leia Organa in your sealed pool, probably. Maybe there's sometimes it pops off. In general, I don't think it's great. Tip the Scale was a good one to try. One that I'm actually like specifically okay in. Obi-Wan Yellow is Disturbance in the Force, which, I mean, again, I want to sound smart here, but yeah, the card that has Obi-Wan in the art, you put that in your Obi-Wan deck, in the set that has Obi-Wan. Yeah, you put the Obi-Wan cards together. Big brained deck building going on here, but I do think it functions really well where if your opponent's interacting with you and you're not able to get the Force that easily, then Disturbance in the Force can help get that ball rolling again. So I do actually quite like that. And gaining the Force is like at its highest value for Obi-Wan because you are like translating that into board presence. So yeah, this deck was just kind of messy and had some like reasonable top end. Like if we got to these Stinger Mantises to enter into text to have those stick, we're in great shape. Gungan Warrior was actually like pretty good at facilitating that, but then again, like we've got those early Force units, and that's kind of it. Like Tusken Tracker is a nice beat stick, but the 3 and 4 slot is not as redundant here as I might like. So we're kind of mulliganing hard for early plays, and that just led to some failure. So this also ended up as a 3 and 3 deck, and I was okay with that one. I probably would have just played more 5s instead of Itinerant Warriors, but I thought that card was really good and kind of filled the niche here of gaining a little bit of life in the late game. Shatterpoint at 6 is totally fine, though. You splash that one any day of the week. Next one is another Talzin deck, and this one is red. And this one was lacking kind of the raw power that the previous one did. You know, there's no Anakin, there's no the Sun, and was there another rare that was good in that one? Not Eye of Perdea. I thought there was one other thing that was kind of nutty in that. So we're down to one Talzin's Assassin here, but we've got a Purge Trooper, which is like kind of a mythic common. Both of these are just mythic commons. Drained Essence at its best here in Talzin. Huge number of early Force plays here, which is just great to see. Deathfield I wasn't sure about, so I was kind of trying to try this one out as well. And Graceful Purgil and Blockade Runner were cards that I was like just kind of playing as like mid-range cards. And in practice, you know, I've talked about coming down on Blockade Runner and similarly coming down on Graceful Purgil. It's a great sideboard card if you're getting aggroed out in space, but I don't think it's what this format is about enough to be main decking it. I don't love Pelimoto in every deck, but with 3 Supremacy TIE fighters in this one, I was actually like kind of on board with it, and she was totally fine. There's also an HK-47 hiding out in here, which is like just basically a stat line and an occasional ping, but she's just totally acceptable. And this also had like a very nice top end of Asajj, Old Daka, Army of the Dead, and Priestesses of the Force. I was kind of skeptical on Priestesses of the Force because, again, as I'm going this is like a bit over the halfway point in the testing process for me, and I'm like kind of low, or like I'm feeling the pressure of this format that it's like really aggressive, and so I'm looking at this 7-drop like, do I put the 7-drop into my deck? This pool actually had 2 Priestesses of the Force, and I've only played 1. And I think, again, this is sort of where I was on the fence during this part. Having gone to the PQ and learned more from that, is like, no, I should be playing both of those. Especially with Talzin, you will get to that point, because I had no doubt as to like the value of this card. It was just, am I going to see this in opening hands and just automatically resource it because I need to not die? And I think like this deck was good enough at not dying that I could have trimmed like this Padawan Starfighter or something and had another Priestesses and been pretty good. Old Daka is just one of the most busted uncommons ever. Just incredible rate. If you ever reset anything for value, specifically Talzin's Assassin, you're living the dream. And even if you just like draw a card with Night Sister Warrior, that's pretty awesome too. So Old Daka is crazy. And Army of the Dead is also just like awesome. There's a really weird dynamic going on in this format where Sealed is awkward, and it has a lot to do with the 2-drops. So, like, I think what makes Heroism good in this format is that you have, like, acceptable 2-drops that come in Heroism. So, like, the N1 Starfighter is great. Lor Santek is a good uncommon. You're, like, Heroism just offers you some good 2-drops to fill out your curve, and the villainy cards tend not to do that. So you're... like Vulptex is another huge one for Heroism that goes in literally any Heroism deck, and Villainy doesn't have that. On the other hand, Villainy has cards like Fallen Jedi and Army of the Dead that like do fill your curve in powerful ways, although Army of the Dead is roughly analogous to Longbeam Cruiser, so that's kind of a non-point. But like Fallen Jedi is sort of your analog to Vulptex, and Vulptex is a lot better. Even though it's not Force, it's just coming down on turn 1. You need to be interacting on turn 1 because of Talzin and Obi-Wan just running away with the game. You have to be on turn 1. And yeah, so the Heroism decks, I think, actually end up functioning a lot better in seal pools because you get more of those units and you're able to utilize them better too. Like Mysterious Hermit is a card I talked about, or not talked about much, but in the last deck, like Mysterious Hermit is awesome with Obi-Wan, but like not terribly exciting with Talzin. So he gets to utilize some of those better. But, cards like Karis are incredible, but your 2-drops in Villainy, you're not getting supported that way. That's part of why, like, yellow is so bad in this set, is, like, you get, like, Adept of Anger and Banking Clan Shuttle and Villainy, and, like, those cards are just not really that good. If you have Snoke, they go up in value quite a bit. So, like, Snoke Yellow is actually pretty good. But, like, Talzin Yellow, Third Sister Yellow, not really what you want to be doing. What's the other one? Oh, Grand Inquisitor. Oh, well, you wouldn't play Grand Inquisitor. Or, Grand Inquisitor is, like, a weird leader. I put some respect on the Grand Inquisitor. I put some respect on his name because I played Set 1 Limited, and Jyn Erso was insane in that format. So I understand, like, people look at GI in this format and they're like, oh, he's not really that good. It's like, no, I see the vision with the leader being powerful. Yellow as a color is just really shallow in this format. So if you do open a good yellow pool, I can be talked into Grand Inquisitor for sure. But like yellow on the whole is just like so much weaker than something like blue that like you naturally are going to get biased that way anyways. And then Talzin herself is just like such a stronger leader than Grand Inquisitor, that you end up with a weird bias that way. But that is to kind of all come back to say that like you are playing Sealed at the mercy of the 2-drops that you open, and Heroism is going to be stronger on the whole. So you do have to like make some sacrifices if you're playing a Villainy deck for your 2-drops. And that's why like Sealed is going to be a little rough, because like if you open a lot of Secretive Sage, which is either the best or the second best common. Talzin's Assassin is the other one in the conversation. Because like Talzin's Assassin is like completely broken, busted, not a fair common. Just none of the numbers are right for that card at common. However, like it does ask of you to like get the game to a certain point and does ask a bit of you. Like literally, like you should play every Secretive Sage that you open. That card is just like the best turn one play that you're reliably happening. And if it similar to Talzin, just like shuts out other things because you can't play them. Like again, Kawaki and Monkey Lizard. You can't play that because your opponent just has a 2/2 shielded on one. Sith Legionnaire, that card's like heinous sometimes because your opponent's just going to trade a shield for it. Like it's Secretive Sage and Talzin apply a ton of pressure to this metagame as to what your early turns can look like. So like this pool, you have enough 2-drops. It's awesome and it's great. We'll talk about my sealed pool at the event later, and that's kind of going to be the flip-flop of this, where like the 2-drops aren't quite looking where I want them to be. But yeah, circling back to talking even more directly about this deck here, I thought this was slightly weaker than the green Talzin list, but this one actually ended up going 5-1, and so this was the best performing deck of the whole testing cycle for me. I feel like in more games, it's probably pretty close to the green deck. I underestimated some of these red cards, but at the same time, like there's just a lot of power here, and like this, I have like really efficient early turns with this. So it's actually quite close, closer than I thought at first. But I still think the green one is like slightly better. But yeah, Talzin, turns out she's just insane. Crazy. So I kind of pushed myself on this next pool. I was like, all right, I know Talzin's the best thing to be doing, but what if I don't open Talzin? How do I like try to look at that? So some of these is not just like building the pool to be the best, but I am building to learn. And so this Cal Kestis deck, I think was like pretty good to start with anyway, but just like had I wanted to pursue this idea of like, how do I build a reasonable deck of another variety if I don't open anything good? Which, side note, like that is a good thing to be aware of. Like, how do you play with the worst leaders? What if you don't open the best? How do you make that work? Because you can still get a top 8 out of that for sure. Absolutely for sure. If you play well enough and build your deck right. But it's an interesting question, and it's one that I find, here's perhaps my hottest take in a long time. I've played a lot of Magic. In Magic, Draft is better than Sealed by a lot. I actually think Sealed is better in Star Wars Unlimited than Draft, and it's specifically for like the fact that the leaders are not balanced perfectly, which is okay, but they're not balanced perfectly. And in Draft, it's so much more punishing because your opponents have brain cells and they're actually smart people. Because when you sit down at a draft table, you are essentially getting like one good pick. You're getting your 3 packs and your best pick out of there. Because everybody to the side of you is looking at what you are opening and saying, how do I screw them? How do they get the least choice in this? And in practice, it comes up, I think, quite regularly that your first choice of those 3 is what you get, because your opponents at the draft table are going to be locking you in to particular colors. They're going to lock you out of the aspect, or they're going to lock you out of like heroism or villainy quite regularly, and be going to giving you trash leaders. Like you can't play Rey or Revan like at all. So like they're going to be handing you the worst of the worst. And basing some of that on your decision. If you get a duplicate, like duplicates in draft are way more common because of your opponents like using that knowledge to make it worse for you. And you just get locked in, and like sometimes like you're just going to end up in a terrible spot in draft. And I think that's like actually quite frequent. And in Sealed, I think it is a lot less frequent. And even with 6 packs, like outside of pre-release, just like Sealed that we're doing here, where you don't have Maul, you don't have Qui-Gon, like I think Sealed is going to give you actually quite a bit more flexibility than Draft will for your leader choice. And Star Wars is a game that's like really defined by your leader. So if your leaders aren't contributing heavily to your game plan, you're going to have a bad time. And I think it is actually quite a bit easier to do that in Sealed and quite a bit more fun to like mess around with some of the other ones. With some of that in mind, I did want to like explore Cal Kestis a little bit here, because from that previous deck with Ahsoka Yellow, I was sort of like, okay, maybe there's kind of the tools at common here to make this blue-yellow aggro thing happen in Heroism. And this was like, all right, I've got reasonable 2-drops. I've got some good upgrades like Heirloom Lightsaber. I know I talked a lot about Jedi Trials before, but I think Cal is like the one leader that you want to play it with, because like it's going to like get him to grow pretty aggressively, and that's just like kind of exciting. And so this deck also had, we got Priestesses of the Force. These long beam cruisers can kind of clean up in the air. I was trying Balin's Skull out on a splash and Vader out on a splash too. The Vader was actually pretty good in gameplay. Like at 8 was just fine for this deck. The Balin was not worth the splash. However, this deck was really bad. This went 1-5. And the only win that this had was versus the only win this had, and the only loss the Tal's in red deck. That was one match. I guess one game to say was like the Talzin deck was undefeated except for this pile. And that was because, as you imagine, variance catches up. And I'm just doing 1-game sets for my testing. So like the Talzin deck just kind of ended up drawing poorly, and the Cal Kestis like had the God Hand. And it was good. But what I did learn is that like no, this shell is not like as aggressive as I want it to be. We are definitely missing like good aggressive 4-drops and a little light on 3-drops here. But at the same time, like I don't think those are actually quite there that much. Like these Medical Frigates and Graceful Purgils were awful for trying to be aggressive. Of course, like Tip the Scale, Mind Trick, and Ceresu's Stance were not cards I was like... Those were there for playable count. They were not actually like cards I'm trying to like put in my deck. But yeah, this just ended up not really coming together and was a good lesson. And I did not learn that lesson because for the next pool, I was like, well, I opened like insane heroism cards. I had Adi Gallia, Kaya and Mace Windu, and Cal Kestis as my only heroism leader. So I was sort of like immediately after the last pool, I was like, all right, well, we got to cool it on Cal Kestis. Maybe he's not really the way to go for this. And then I'm like, all right, well, now I'm like locked into playing him because I couldn't turn away double Kaya Mace Windu. Like, come on. It's just, we got it. And I hadn't done any red heroism up to this point. So I was sort of like, due diligence, give it a bit of an exploration. Not in the sense that like, yeah, I don't need to explore yellow villainy. Like they're fine doing what they're doing. That yellow villainy is just kind of like that's part of why Grand Inquisitor is so bad. Is like it's not that he's a bad leader. It's that like that's the worst of the 8 aspects to be on. And so as a result, you're just like less and less incentivized to end up with a Grand Inquisitor deck, even though he's not that bad. But I'll remain a Kit Fisto hater. I will remain a Kit Fisto hater for sure. But this deck was, again, missing some playables here, like Tip the Scale continuing to show up even when I don't want it to. Unleash Rage is a card that I thought might be okay in this shell. It was not really that great. We've got a lot of 2-drops here, like very light on 3-drops, which was problematic, just for keeping value up the curve. But we had good 4-drops at least. But this deck ended up going 2-4, and it's kind of what you imagine, where it's like the times when Mace Windu would show up, we're crushing games. But there's also times where my leaders just get gobbled up by, like Cal Kestis gets gobbled up by a Knight of Ren, and you're like, oh, I have no way to deal that last point of damage. And my leader's just gone, and now I'm facing down the Talzin, and you're like, cool, guess I'll die. So 2-4 felt pretty realistic for this. Don't think this was the greatest shell for it, but he's my only heroism leader. And that as much as I just kind of talked up Sealed there, like this is like something that will happen on occasion, and then there are bad Sealed pools out there. So yeah. So coming away from all of this testing, I felt like I needed to be aggressive. I felt like the heroism cards were really bad, so I wanted to bias very heavily towards villainy, and wanted to come out strong in the early turns, have a low curve, and very light on 5 through 6 drops. And I think some of that was just wrong, for sure. And I should have been playing for a longer game, but that led me to my PQ deck. And I opened some like pretty good rares. I got a Craving Power, Constructed Lightsaber, so like that's already kind of insane. And so that's just one of those, like, I'm not going to lie to you, like a little bit embarrassed to talk about this because it's like, yeah, I opened Craving Power and Constructed Lightsaber and an adequate pool, and I didn't get there. It's kind of not great. The mother or the daughter, I don't know why I get that mixed up all the time. The daughter, the daughter and Eth Koth are just like pretty fine rares. Like their stats are like normal for their cost. Their abilities are useful but not exciting. Like the daughter is just like kind of worse than Jedi Guardian, and Eth Koth is just like the same as what's the undead common 4/5 for 4. You're getting 9 stats for 4 resources. Awakened Specters, I want to say. Obviously, attack is a little bit better for a shell like this, but it's still like kind of the same card, except we get to use the Force. But him also being Force is pretty relevant, I would say. That part is definitely real upside here. But those are both kind of medium rares. I have an Axe Woves in here as well, who's just like extremely fine. He's got a cool Splinter Twin situation with Calm in the Storm. You're going with a bunch of experience tokens and another shield, and it's just ginormous. That was pretty fun to pull off. I don't know if it was good, so like the cards that I opened were by and large like decent. I had a good pool. I was actually like kind of mentally unprepared, I will say. And part of that was 4 hours of sleep the night before because I got off work and then woke up at 4 o'clock to drive to Rochester. But at the same time, I don't think it was just sleep. I felt like they gave us 30 minutes to deck build. So we opened pools for ourselves. Then we handed them to the person across the table. And then we filled out their list to register their pool for them to maintain, competitive integrity. And during that time, I'm looking at somebody else's pool entirely, and as you know from this channel, I like to talk. The person across the table from me was also very chatty. I believe, I think their name was Jeff, too. Really nice old fellow. Older, sorry. And so we were having a nice conversation as we're going through doing that, but like the judges were like actually like pretty direct with us that like you should not be talking during deck building, even though like then once we finish registering, we're like waiting on, and I have Jeff's cards in front of me, and like I don't actually get to look at my pool during this time, and so I got a little bit dissuaded from that because then they're like, okay, kept waiting and waiting and waiting for everybody to finish up with their pool, and they're like, okay, now hand your pool back to your opponent, get your pool back, you have 30 minutes to deck build. And I struggled to do this in 30 minutes. I had kind of, forgotten about some of the cards that I opened, had to like lay everything back out, visualize, and go through. And in 30 minutes, I struggled to put this together. I was like really close. And I also had I wanted to ask a question to the judge, and that took like 5 minutes because I didn't want to play foils in my pool because like that's a marked card. And I was like, am I allowed to do this in sealed? And they're like, yeah, do it. And I'm like, what do you mean do it? Like it's a curled foil. Like it's very obvious. So I don't think any foils actually ended up making the cut for me here, which was fine. But like I was actually like a little concerned about that. So I do think that I think that translated to 2 big errors. One, I thought I'd have more time to deck build, so I thought I could shuffle up and like play some games out by myself and like try to visualize how things are going to go. I didn't have anywhere close to the time to do that. And I also wanted to like look at different builds of my pool and try to compare those. I really didn't have time to do that. I had time to like build the one thing. And I have these 4 cards pulled out that aren't sleeved at the bottom here because these were things that like I sideboarded in over the course of the event. And ultimately are cards I think should have been in the main deck. And these are the Ravening Gundark, Last Words, Grappling Guardian, and Hyperspace Wayfarer. Cards that like underperformed for me were Kadu and Tauntaun, which were just like unsurprisingly not good enough and should have absolutely been the Gundark and the Grappling Guardian. Because those cards were fine. But again, was also informed by like I thought the games were going to be shorter. The games went a lot longer, so I needed to have like the Gundark and the Grappling Guardian, but I didn't really think that was going to be the case going into it. Also had this Point Rain Reclaimer. That should never have been in the deck. That was bad. That was like the Tauntaun and the Kadu. I at least had like a mental thing going on. The Point Rain Reclaimer was just a spew. That one should have just been any other of these 4 cards would have been completely fine. And the other cut that I made frequently, if I needed to get space in, what was the last one? Oh, this Overpower. Because I thought sometimes that might be helpful to make trades or like finish the game out. Didn't really play out that way, so I think Last Words would have been much better at a similar effect. So I was a little disappointed in that. I didn't feel like I get to spend enough time prepping my main deck, but at least we got to learn as the day went on. So I only very quickly got to visualize the Talzin Red build of this pool, and at home afterwards I did it out, and so this is how my pool could have been built as Talzin Red, and I don't know. I really don't know about this one. This is one, again, I feel good, like I gotta talk about this, but it is kind of embarrassing to look at this and be like, I think I built the wrong deck. There's some like definite weakness here. My main concern was that like I didn't have, like if other people were playing Talzin of some variety, they were gonna crush me. I have no assassins. I've got a singular Drain Essence. Like I'm lacking in the really powerful cards to be playing with Talzin. So I was sort of just like, am I just going to be playing a worse version of that? Versus like, I felt like the Obi-Wan deck was at least reasonably streamlined. So I kind of talked myself out of it because I was looking at like this Hyena Bomber, the Takata Sand Trooper Cavalry, which ended up like a lot of people played Sand Trooper Cavalry. I guess that card's better than I thought, but I was especially at this part of the day, I was pretty low on it. I wasn't even really considering Grappling Guardian as a good top end card. It was kind of humorous that I got to splash Kaya-to-Mundi and Craving Power for the exact same rates that I was splashing in Obi-Wan Blue, but yeah, I kind of felt like this was even less focused than the Obi-Wan deck. So from the brief look I had at it, I was like, all right, I'm going to try Obi-Wan. So, and ended up back there. And I don't hate this. I think it's actually like pretty close to like which of these two you should play over the other. One thing that I do feel like kind of sways is like the Talzin list had some like different. Well, it had different space units. I guess you didn't play Mynock Medical Frigate or a Long Beam Cruiser, so it's all like the Strike Ship Hyena Bomber and whatever the Cartel Infiltrator thingy is, or Cartel Interceptor. So it's sort of all the same for space, but yeah, I was just a little disappointed that I didn't get to like figure out that decision a bit more in the moment, and that's on me for like not being quicker with that. But even so, like it's been 5 days, and I'm still like I don't know, man. I don't know which of these decks was better. I feel okay with this. Like I don't feel like I made a horrible decision, but I absolutely don't have the confidence to tell you that I made the right decision, and I wish I had that confidence. So yeah, we ended up with this deck though, and this deck was sweet. This deck was really fun. We had some cool stuff. Constructed Lightsaber is like one of the best, if not the best, legendary to open because it goes in literally everything. Like I said, we had some fun stuff to do with Axe Woves and Calm in the Storm, even though I didn't understand how that card worked entirely. Like, we had a Torrent attack. Itinerant Warrior was insane on curve. I got to live the dream once of putting Constructed Lightsaber on Itinerant Warrior, attacking with it, then playing Jocasta Nu, moving the Constructed Lightsaber to my Obi-Wan leader, and then attacking with that. That was overkill, entirely unnecessary, but very cute. But Jocasta is also just like a totally fine uncommon. Not fine, good. She's good. She adds quality to this deck. So yeah, let's talk about how the matches went. So in the first round, I played versus a gentleman named Ian, and he was playing Obi-Wan Blue, and this was tough. He had Gunji like turn 1, 2 games, and I was fortunate enough to have Crushing Blow in both of those games to like actually like not die immediately, because Gunji plus Obi-Wan is like game over. If you can't answer it, like that is just so much damage so quickly. That is just really tough to keep up with. I was very fortunate to actually be able to interact with that profitably. I played really badly in the second game. It was the second game. I think I still I guess I ended up winning anyway, but or maybe it was win-loss. I don't know. But it was a game where he played a long beam cruiser, and I had the Grappling Guardian in hand, so I was like, oh, word. No, yeah, because I got soloed by long beam cruiser in game 1, so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like claim and like try to Grappling Guardian this long beam cruiser. Didn't use any of my resources, missed like 4 damage on board because I claimed so aggressively. And then he just uses Obi-Wan to put a counter on the long beam cruiser, and now my Grappling Guardian doesn't kill it. And it's just an onboard trick in round 1 that I missed, and it was just like I was so defeated after that one. Like I don't believe the tilt affected my play, because at that point I was also like, all right, I have no shot to win. I'm just going all base all the time. You figure it out. And I was able to win, I guess, somehow. But like that was an embarrassing mistake to make in that game, where I was just like feeling like, oh, I was going to blow him out on that turn, and just was not able to do it at all. And indeed just wasted a lot of time and actions. That was pretty rough. Game 3, there was no shot of me winning. No shot. Because we're playing a close game. I again killed the Gunji. We're going back and forth. It's like the Obi-Wan mirror. There's just a lot of trades happening on the ground. Then turn 6, he plays Kelleran Beck into Obi-Wan. And I'm like, oh my god, I can't beat that. Then the next turn, he plays Yoda. And it's like, what are we even doing here? like, my deck is fine. But like, I can't beat a Yoda. I can't beat a Kelleran Beck into a Yoda. So I was like, that was okay. Like, he played better than me, and he had a better deck than me. So this was like already like, I'm cool losing that. Like that's just, I can't beat that. That's okay. Round number 2, I played versus a gentleman named Jesse, who drove all the way from Maine, an absolute legend for that. And he was playing Obi-Wan Red. So we're again in another Obi-Wan mirror. And this one I won pretty comfortably. And with respect to my opponent, I just don't think he understood how good Talzin is in this metagame. Because he was playing a lot of cards that were, like, I think our games were close, but there's a lot of cards that showed up that were just like, you can't play this with Talzin existing. Like, he had a lot of the red hidden creatures, so like Attuned Frynok on turn 1, which is pretty good versus some of my deck. Also got hosed versus a Shielded Sage. Or, Secretive Sage, but Shielded Sage is probably a better name. And, like, you just can't play a 4-1 no text with, like, Talzin in the game. Like, you just can't open yourself up to that. Similarly, like, the Takata that I showed before, the 4-2 hidden for 3. It's like, that just gets nuked on a Talzin flip turn for 0 value. Excuse me. So, like, his deck was cool, but just not equipped to handle even just like the blue commons that I was throwing his way. So like the Secretive Sage was really powerful. Itinerant Warrior was just backbreaking for him because like the 4/4 shielded, you don't have a good way to do that. And this is something it's not like I'm trying to put my opponent down here, but I learned this lesson the hard way. At the pre-release, I played Avar Chris Red, I believe. That was pre-release, yeah. And I played versus Eric from Against the Galaxy on Kanan Green, and he just loaded up a Lothwolf with shields, and I just scooped because I can't actually beat that with a red-green deck. And that was he and I talked at that pre-release. Eric and I talked afterward. It's like, yeah, there's just like nothing in red-green heroism that can beat a big shielded unit. It's like actually kind of a significant oversight. Like you just don't have the tools to do anything about it. A Lothwolf with 2 shield counters on it, you're just dead. And my deck doesn't do that, but I put like Constructed Lightsaber on Itinerant Warrior, and it's like, great, you got to throw like four cards into this to kill it. And that's really not good. So, and I'm like restoring in the meanwhile, attacking with my Obi-Wan. So like there was like structurally I was pretty favored in this matchup, but it's also part of like, this is something like that was a color combination that I was like consciously trying to stay away from. And this match did kind of demonstrate some of those issues. But it was a fun match. The third one, I played versus Chris on Talzin Red. They were a judge. So they were very smart. And this was... So, like, I had the inkling in round 1 that I'm like, oh, my opponent's built a deck that can go quite a bit longer than mine can. But at the same time, in round 1, it's like, they've got Kelleran back. They've got Yoda. Like, they've got units that just kind of, like, let them do that. And my pool did not have those. So it's sort of like, you know, we're playing the later mirror. And I'm like, okay, yeah, Ian's going to get me on that one. I think we play that matchup a few more times. He's still probably going to roll me. I got beaten by Chris on Talzin Red here. And this was definitely, like, my opponent is smarter than me, has built a better deck than me, and knows more about what's going on than I do. And I'm losing because of that. And, like... We got to the bottom cards of our deck in most of these, in the 2 games that I lost, we got to the bottom of the deck. And I was just not really anticipating that. My deck actually ended up functioning okay in that situation, but I was not planning for it in the way that Chris was planning for it. And he really beat me up for it. So this was a pretty commanding loss. Even though, like, game 1, he won by 1 action. He was much more in the driver's seat than I was. I also punted really badly. I don't want to say punt. I just don't like that word. I made a really significant mistake in game 1 because I thought I had engineered the situation where I was able to play a Curious Flock that was presenting lethal damage, and then I was just going to be able to claim aggressively and like force him to figure it out. Turns out Curious Flock, it's not a magic card. You can only pay up to 6. I thought it was like pay any number of resources. Get this? So I was like, here's my 10/10 Curious Flock. And Chris is just like, dude, you can't do that. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you can only pay up to 6. And so my entire game plan fell apart with that because I was really like banking on like the aggressive claim there to get me there. And instead we had to play more turns, and then I just like completely missed onboard lethal and let him kill me in 1 action. So it wasn't like completely egregious, but I lost that game. A better player might have won that game. Game 2, I did get pretty lucky to just like curve out with a constructed lightsaber and really do some damage. But losing this match was like, I think his deck was better, he played better, and he had a better understanding of what this metagame was than I did. So at 1 and 2 here, I was feeling pretty bad. I was like, I thought I was prepared, and I am not prepared. I am not doing great here. And then in round 4, we get Friendly Fire versus Nick from Against the Galaxy. Was a great friend. Love playing with him. He's an absolute delight. And he unfortunately had a pretty stinky pool. I was at this point feeling a little confused because I didn't feel like my pool was bad, but I was doing worse than I wanted to. Of course, nobody wants to be 1-2, but like, I felt bad for Nick here because it's like, no, his pool was bad. Like, the leader's just pulling him all over the place. A lack of good bombs. Like, me just showing up with an ETH Koth was like problematic. And like, the legendary that I opened was Constructed Lightsaber. The legendary that Nick opened was Mythosaur. And like, even though we played a pretty long game, it's like, yeah, Mythosaur did not end up getting him there. So this one, we actually played a pretty long game in both parts of the match, but I ended up being pretty far ahead. What was pretty cool here, though, is I mentioned that Ahsoka Yellow deck I did in testing. I played Ogdo Bogdo in that. And Nick actually had Ogdo Bogdo in his pool, so he got to do that same interaction there, which was actually pretty cool, because like getting a rare to do that in Sealed is like not that common, but it was cool to see that come back up again. I really enjoyed that, and Nick is just a wonderful person to play with. But I felt bad for him on that. So we're 2-2. We were fighting back for it. And then in the 5th round, I play versus a gentleman named Matt on Third Sister Blue. Third Sister Blue. And this was, again, I felt like, okay. They are playing a very aggressive deck. Like, Third Sister just kind of demands you to be aggressive. The games were pretty cool and how they played out, that like her hidden ability actually mattered quite a bit, and so it forced me to race. But Constructed Lightsaber is like, particularly in a heroism shell, is kind of insane to race, because either I'm giving Restore to a heroism unit or I'm giving Sentinel to a like secretive sage. And both of those situations are like really difficult. So at a baseline, I felt favored here. However, I got murdered into the gosh darn ground in game 2 because they had a Cartel Interceptor. They put a Battle Fury on it. I was like very close to dying to it. But I get to deploy Long Beam Cruiser in space. It's like my one answer, right? And he doesn't even attack with the Cartel. He just claims. And I'm like, that's not good. And so he untaps on 7 resources and then uses the Force to play Liberated by Darkness, which is a yellow villainy rare, and steals my Long Beam Cruiser. So now I'm not even killing the Cartel Intercept. He's basically getting 2 attacks out of that. Plus he steals my 6/6 for the turn. Just completely murders me that turn for Xaxes. It was so cool. It was absolutely insane. And yeah, so I was more conscious of that in game 3 as best you can. It was not exactly something that's easy to play around. But that was really cool. And he also demonstrated, again, a further lack of understanding of the format. And this is something I touched on earlier, was I thought the lightsabers were good to put on your units. And like, I thought that was a powerful thing to be doing. I was not really considering splashing for the common lightsabers, but he was splashing for 2 heirloom lightsabers, which is a blue heroism card, and he was putting those on his Third Sister. And it was good. It was good. And I was just kind of like taken aback a little bit on that one. Granted, and part of it was they were good because it was Third Sister who has hidden, so I wasn't able to clear the leader as easily. And she pushes damage pretty aggressively in that way, but it was still like, that was another one of getting my eyes opened up that like, maybe I should have been doing that. And that wasn't really something on my radar. So it's good to be like learning from this event, but also it's like, you don't want to be learning in the middle of this. This is like information I kind of wish that I had more at the start, and that's okay, but we're learning. Round 6, I face more friendly fire with Jeff, not the Jeff that I was deck building with, but the Jeff that I drove. He and 2 other people piled into my little Subaru, and we made our way there early in the wee hours of the morning. And Jeff, so I was 3-2 going into this, and Jeff was 3-1-1. These games were not close. Both were really bad for me too. in both games, I mulliganed my first hand, and then my only turn 1 play was Curious Flock in both games. So, like, that's not really good. I was able to get a Secretive Sage in one of those, and then loaded up with a Constructed Lightsaber, and then put on a Calm in the Storm. So I had like this massive Secretive Sage that was like slowly breaking things down, but then we got to like the top end of my deck, and I just wasn't able to compete with what Jeff had going on. So yeah, with all due respect, I got stomped here. This was like, I think my deck inadvertently, like, versus Chris's going long, I think I kind of like accidentally ended up with a deck that was like okay at doing that. I was actually unequipped to deal with Jeff here, and again felt kind of bad about that because like I was feeling pretty conscientious about Talzin going into the event, and having a lot of respect for her, and I don't think I actually executed that, and that's a good thing to be self-critical of, that like I did not really do what I set out to do in that sense, although I had some of that information. And for the last round, it was another Obi-Wan deck. We got to see the whole spectrum here. We got Obi-Wan Blue, Obi-Wan Red, and now we're finishing out with Derek on Obi-Wan Yellow. And this was, again, I think kind of similar to Nick. I had better cards. Like, both games were decided by the fact that I had Craving Power on 7. And that was just, like, very difficult for him to beat. And the early, like, game 2 was especially rough for Derek. He did not have a turn 2 play, and that let me suit. We both had a Minoc on turn 1, and then turn 2 he didn't do anything, so I was able to, like, use that to my advantage, get an experience token on what's his face, the Minoc, and then eat his Minoc for free, and then I just have a ton of tempo going through. And so like I'm ahead on tempo. The Obi-Wan flip turn was kind of weird for both of us, but like whatever, it's always going to be a little weird. And then I just have Craving Power, and the game just kind of ends. So that was that one, and the match versus Nick, I was kind of just like, oh yeah, my pool was like just better. I think like my win versus Third Sister Blue was like, I was prepared for like aggressive decks, and while it was not the description I was thinking of, like I had the tools to like be able to beat that. And definitely beating Jesse on Obi-Wan Red was like a lesson I learned from from like the pre-release, that like these colors have a really difficult time dealing with this. I'm going to present that and just hope that it kills them. And it did. So I was like, I was happy, obviously, with a 4-3. For me, that protects my ego, right? Like I won more than I lost. I was pretty happy with that. It's the first sealed event of this competitive caliber, and I was excited to have done okay. And I had a lot of lessons to learn here, and I hope that I can convert some of that into future success or better knowledge. One of the interesting things that we're starting to understand here is how metagames develop for sealed, and so like Talzin being the best thing going on here is like actually pretty interesting. Because, like, yeah, there's other, like, playable leaders, but Talzin's the best common. And we had a similar thing with Twilight of the Republic. Anakin Skywalker was not even close to, like, Talzin at least has some competition. Anakin did not have competition. Anakin was busted in that format. I'm glad we didn't have to do a PQ of sealed of that. As much as I do like Twilight of the Republic Limited, like, Anakin was a pretty sore spot. And I would think that Jump to Light Speed might be the best limited format they've had, but it also has some quirks because of the space stuff going on. But like most of the leaders are pretty good in that. But like Darth Vader is, I think, the best leader. Luke Skywalker is like a close second, or closer second. I don't think Vader is as good in that format as Talzin and Anakin were, but I think like it's also very difficult to come back against Vader in a lot of situations. So what I'm trying to get at here is that like there's starting to be a pattern there of there are going to be dominant leaders in a limited format, which is like really interesting if we want to continue this as a competitive format. And if that is a trend that will continue in leader development, like that's actually kind of an interesting and more importantly, that's an exploitable pattern right there. And that's something that like, it's kind of different from Magic. Because Magic in the way sets are designed now, you have your like signpost uncommons. There's the 10 signpost uncommons and those are of like varying quality. But like for most of those signpost uncommons, you can imagine a deck that you get that just like abuses the heck out of that. And it does feel like Magic, you're kind of building like the most powerful thing that you can do. But I feel like in contrast here, Sealed in Star Wars is like, I had some ideas going into this event of how I can exploit this metagame. And I learned and saw a lot of other people doing exploiting in that way. And that's really interesting. Like, how does that information cascade work from there? And how does that inform your deck building decisions? I am really excited for the future of Star Wars as like a competitive limited format. Like there's just a lot of interesting stuff to go over. Like, yeah, you're going to have weaker pools and stronger pools for sure, but like it's not all that. Like I think there's quite a bit more that we can try to understand from these. And I'm excited to hope to do more of that in the future. So yeah. I have 2 other lists that I would like to talk about. Jeff here, who I drove with, made top 8 of this event. He won out, won his last round, so he ended up 5-1-1, made top 8. The other 2 folks in my car, Ben, who we met last video, he went 5-2, did not, he missed top 8, unfortunately. And Bill, who also drove with us, went 3-4. So, Bill and I kind of dragged down the ship a little bit, but we had a very strong showing for the car. I'm gonna say, that's a very positive record on the whole. We did some good business. Team Shrimp Scampi came to play. So in our local Discord, Jeff did a nice write up on what his event was and how it went for him. So his sealed and then his draft. And so I've got those deck lists here. I'd like to talk about them for a little bit. So this first one is his sealed deck. And he gets to show off his champion playmat here too. And this is just a very solid deck. It's very weak on the turn 1 plays, but after that things pick up a lot of steam. There's not a tremendous number of bombs here. Indeed, are there any rares? No, there are not any. Not any rares, but just a lot of quality up and down the curve. Eighth Brother is absolutely insane. Torrent Attack is great. The Protect Deposit, Whirlwind of Power are doing a great job here. And I think really what he talked about was Inquisitor's Lightsaber was a standout here because of how it made his Talzin flip turns incredibly threatening that turn and every turn thereafter. Because if you flip first, put an Inquisitor's Lightsaber on, you're killing an opposing Talzin. And you're killing Ahsoka's very easily. And Snoke's, you're threatening to ever deploy. So Inquisitor's Lightsaber on Talzin is a uniquely powerful interaction that I just did not really put enough respect on and maybe should have. But he does have great cards here in Chirrut, Talzin's Assassin, Jedi Temple Guards, and Duplicate. Just great at enabling the Force and having great control over the ground. So this is just a good deck. What is really the sauce here, though, and I have to preface this a little bit, is that Jeff's draft deck in top 8 is one of the most insane things I've ever seen, right? So he comes the three of us, we went and got dinner during the draft, and he comes back and he's filling out his sheet, and we can't talk to him while he's doing that. Totally fine. But he comes over to us afterwards, and he's like, guys, I think I cheated. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he shows us the list. And I'm like, he actually went and talked to the judges because he's like, it's going to look like I cheated because of how good this deck is. And the judges agreed with him. They're like, this does look weird, but like, okay, you know, they watched the draft very intently. They know that nothing shady happened, but it was rough. And part of that is what I talked about earlier with your opponents at the draft table making things complicated. And so there were 3 Talzin players at the draft table, and they were all to the left of Jeff. So and to the right of him ended up being 3 Heroism players. So he was getting passed from the Heroism players for 2 of the 3 packs. And he just got first dibs on a lot of great stuff as a result of that. And like, that's not a mistake that any people made. It's just that the 2 people to the left of him, they opened Talzins, they first picked those Talzins, and they're in. They're like very interested in villainy at that point. And the people to the right of Jeff did not have that opportunity. And as a result, like, there's just some incredible stuff that gets passed downstream to him. And so that's what's happening. Like, they're getting past, you know, the Heroism players do also see the benefit of this, right? Because they're going to have like better access from those villainy players just passing it around to them. However, like, I can't really stress this enough of like how dominant Talzin is. Like, those 3 Talzin players, 4 of them, or all 3 of them won their first match and proceeded to the semis. And then Jeff had to beat another Talzin player in the semis to get to the finals. And Alex was the other finalist, was also playing Talzin, made it to the finals. So the 2 of the 3 Talzin players made it all the way to the finals. And like, one of them got cut out in the semis because that's just how math works. There's no way that he could have gotten further. So like, the Talzin decks were good in the draft. And not only that, Jeff got like the best of that. So let's take a look at his deck. So there's 3 things here that are completely inappropriate. And it's funny because he was watching us as we looked at his deck. And we get to those at different points. The first thing I found when I looked at this was... Oh, there's something happening next door. Sorry. It came at a weird time because I'm also really excited talking about this. The 3 things that we're like most looking at here is the first. 3 old Dakas. What are you talking about? 3 of them? Like one of the best uncommons. You still got an 8th brother in there too. But no, you've got 3 old Dakas to go with your Talzin's assassin. Like, what are we talking about? How does that happen? 2 craving powers. The first craving power is like, whatever. I assume you first pick this and this just locks you in, right? But no, it's two craving powers. He got both of them in pack 3, and they got passed to him from those 3 Heroism players. It was like pick 4 craving power, pick 5 craving power in pack 3. It's completely absurd. And then he's still got a constructed lightsaber on here too. So like, as we're talking about the Talzin flip turn where you're concerned about the mirrors, like, you've got this constructed lightsaber just slap on there. You're just going to immediately murk the other Talzin. Nothing they can do about it. And initiative becomes so much more important as a result of that. But just like those 3 cards, the Dakas, the craving powers, and the constructed lightsaber is just crazy good in this. It's just crazy good. He's also got 2 Fallen Jedis and an Outer Rim Mystic, which are excellent 3 drops. The 2 drops are definitely, like, you can tell he kind of got cut here. There's no Secretive Sage. There's only 1 Gifted Urchin, and then, like, Padawan Starfighters, and, I guess that was a Night Sister Warrior in there. And an Exegol Patroller, which is not where you want to be when you're expecting a lot of Talzins, but it gets the job done. But, this was just like a pretty insane draft. And Jeff was funny with it. He said it's like he would have felt bad if he didn't win the event with this draft. And I do understand that. Like, this 5 drop part of the curve, triple Daka, double craving power, like, what? How are you going to beat that? And like in the Talzin Green Mirror that he played in the finals, you can't really beat that. Like, he had like the Alex, who was the opposing Talzin Green player, had a very good curve in the second game where he went turn 1 Sith Legionnaire, turn 2 Knight of Ren, and I think that's like uniquely problematic for this beat to deal with. Like this is actually quite bad at dealing with a 4 power Sith Legionnaire, versus a lot of other Force decks are like pretty competent at handling that. This one's not really. So Jeff got rolled pretty good in those games, and the other games were close. Don't get me wrong, but like, well, game one they went to milling, and Jeff won both with damage on board, but also to Alex drawing from a card from an empty deck. So that was pretty cool. But then game 3, it was close because like the Talisman flip turns are very interesting, but and they were trading back and forth. And then in game 3, he sticks an Army of the Dead and then goes double craving power over the next 2 turns. And it's like, yeah, that's just game over. So that was really exciting for him. I was very happy to win. But yeah, these are also like, I kind of wanted to talk about these. One, it had nice, high quality pictures to share. And 2, like, again, this is the first sealed PQ. And with the draft top 8, like, there's not really deck lists like available for this. And I'd really love to have seen, like, if the TOs could release like all of the deck lists for that event online in some way, like that'd be so cool to look at that information and see what people did, what choices they made. But for now, it's like, all right, I want to share at least the information that I have available to me at my fingertips. So I tried to keep it a little bit shorter on this one. That's going to be hard to believe, but try to keep myself moving through this at a reasonable pace. But it's pretty fun to talk about. Absolutely amazing event to attend. Millenium Games in Rochester is just one of the best game stores I've ever been to, if not the. Great staff, great place to hang out, and I had a great time with the friends, and like obviously so excited that Jeff won. It was also just fun for us anyway, and I was really glad to have participated in the event, contributed in some small way to the event's success, and been a part of this interesting metagame development with that. So yeah, that's kind of all I have. Thank you, Jeff, for posting his tournament report, so I was able to steal those images and talk about them a little bit. And yeah, let me know what you think. Hopefully we get more Sealed to talk about in the future. Love to continue to learn. And yeah, see ya.